They said the forest was silent after dusk, but deep within, a chapel stood with candles that never died, and whispers that refused to be forgotten. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Whispers of Grace, where forgotten promises, faith, and mysteries come alive. The first time 17-year-old Clara Hemsley heard the story of the forest chapel, she laughed it off like the rest of the town's children. A chapel hidden deep within the woods where the candles never went out, even in storm or snow. It sounded like a tale grandmothers told to keep curious feet away from dangerous paths. But on this evening, the laughter was gone. Clara walked beside her older brother, Thomas, 24, as the fading sun dipped behind the tree line. The autumn air was damp, filled with the smell of leaves decomposing underfoot. The forest swallowed sound. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of their boots. She wrapped her shawl tighter, her chest heavy with the memory of what had driven them here. Jonah Caro, Thomas's closest friend, had vanished 2 nights ago after swearing he would find the chapel. "Are you sure about this?" Clara whispered, her voice barely carrying in the stillness. Thomas's jaw clenched, his lantern casting trembling light over the narrow path. His eyes, dark and tired, didn't waver from the road ahead. "I won't leave him out here, Clara. If the chapel's real, then maybe Jonah's still there." Clara shivered. The town spoke in hushed tones about those who lingered too long in the chapel. They said the whispers grew stronger, calling you by name, making promises no soul should listen to. Some who returned were never the same. Some never returned at all. The siblings walked in silence until the trees parted into a small clearing. There, half swallowed by ivy and fog, stood the chapel. Its wooden frame sagged with age, its steeple cracked, but inside the tall windows glowed faint light. Candlelight. Clara's breath caught. "It's real." Thomas lifted his lantern higher, but he didn't need to. The chapel itself seemed alive, its glow spilling softly into the clearing like a heartbeat. And within that glow, shadows moved, as if welcoming them. They stepped closer, each footfall heavier than the last. Clara's palms were slick with sweat. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "Do you hear that?" Thomas stopped. The air inside the clearing wasn't silent anymore. Faint, low whispers drifted on the wind, curling around them like invisible vines. Words Clara couldn't catch, yet somehow she thought she heard her name, Clara. Her chest tightened. "Thomas, it said, 'Don't listen,'" Thomas hissed, grabbing her wrist. His hand was ice cold. "It's only tricks. Just the wind." But as they reached the chapel's doors, Clara dared one glance at the stained glass window above. The virgin candles inside flickered with golden fire, steady and eternal, and for the briefest second, she swore she saw Jonah's reflection in the glass, smiling at her from within. Her lips parted, a whisper escaping before she could stop herself. "Jonah?" The door creaked open. The door groaned as Thomas pushed it inward, the old wood dragging against the stone threshold. A wave of warmth rolled out, carrying with it the faint scent of beeswax and incense, as though the chapel had never been abandoned. Clara hesitated on the step, her 17-year-old heart racing. The glow inside was far brighter than what the windows had promised. Hundreds, no, thousands of candles lined the walls, stood upon the altar and crowded the pews. Some burned tall, their wax untouched. Others had melted into twisted shapes, yet their flames danced just as strong. Not one flickered as though threatened by death. "It's impossible," Clara breathed. Thomas, 24 and stubborn as ever, raised his lantern, though its flame seemed pitiful compared to the eternal light inside. He stepped forward, his boots echoing sharply against the stone floor. "Jonah?" His voice carried into the vaulted ceiling, where cobwebs clung like tattered banners. "Jonah, are you here?" The chapel answered with whispers. Soft at first, like the rustling of distant fabric, then rising, folding over one another, 1,000 unseen tongues murmuring in chorus. Clara clasped her hands to her ears, but the sound wasn't outside, it was inside. In her mind, in her very bones, Clara, her name slipped through the whispers like a thread pulled through cloth, delicate and undeniable. She froze, breath caught in her throat. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's calling me." Thomas turned sharply, his lantern quivering. His eyes glistened with fear, though his jaw set hard. "Don't answer. No matter what you hear, don't answer." But then another name came, spoken so clearly it was as if the voice leaned between them. Thomas. The sound of his name sent him stumbling back, his face pale. The whispers thickened, growing louder, weaving their way around the chapel until the air itself trembled. Clara's gaze darted to the altar, where the tallest candles blazed like pillars of gold. Shadows writhed along the walls, shaping themselves into figures, half-formed, watching. And there, between those shadows, Clara saw him. Jonah Caro, 19, his hair disheveled, his eyes wide with something that was not entirely his own. He stood at the far end of the aisle, his hands outstretched toward them. "Thomas!" Clara cried. But Thomas did not move. His breath came fast, ragged. "That's not him." Jonah's lips parted, his voice carrying through the air with uncanny clarity. "Why did you come? You shouldn't have come." The candles nearest him surged, flames bending in his direction as if obeying his command. The whispers grew sharper, names spilling through the chapel like a tide, names Clara recognized. People from their town, people who had disappeared. Clara's knees trembled. "Thomas, we have to leave." Jonah's voice cut her off. "Too late. They know you now." As if in answer, the great wooden doors slammed shut behind them, the echo shaking the chapel to its foundations. The lantern fell from Thomas's grip, shattering, though the eternal flames gave no heed. And in the pulsing golden glow, Clara realized something terrible. The candles weren't feeding on wax alone. Each flame seemed tethered to a name whispered in the dark, including hers. Clara's breath came shallow and fast. The golden flames flickered in unison, as though the whispers themselves commanded them. Every voice swirled into a terrible chorus, spilling the names of the lost: Jonah, Margaret, Elias, Ruth, Daniel, each tied to a candle's unwavering fire. Thomas, 24, grabbed his sister's hand, his grip tight enough to hurt. "We're leaving." But when he yanked her toward the door, the heavy wood refused to budge. It was as if the chapel had swallowed its own entrance, sealing them inside. Jonah stood in the center aisle, 19, his pale face a mask of sorrow. His eyes met Thomas's, pleading, almost human. "You can't leave once the fire knows your name." Clara's stomach twisted. "Jonah, please come back with us." "Everyone thinks you're gone?" His voice cracked, but the whispering behind it never faltered. "Maybe I am. Maybe I'm here." "The fire doesn't let go, Clara. It feeds. It remembers." Thomas shook his head, refusing the words. His chest heaved, anger pushing back his fear. "This is madness." "You're alive. We'll get you out." But as he stepped forward, the shadows along the chapel's walls shifted, detaching from their places like dark figures peeling off the plaster. They moved with jerks and staggers, faceless silhouettes that reached with long arms toward him. Clara screamed, pulling Thomas back. "They don't want us near him." Jonah's gaze flickered, torn between warning and despair. "Listen to me. Every flame here burns with a promise. Someone lit them. Someone prayed and never returned. If you answer the whispers, if you give your name willingly, the flame binds you." Clara's heart raced. She looked at the altar again. Hundreds of candles, each tied to a soul. Some flames shone steady, strong. Others guttered weakly, as if near to dying. Her throat tightened. "Jonah, whose flame is yours?" He didn't answer. Instead, the whispers surged louder, a river of voices rising toward a single word. "Stay." Thomas pulled Clara behind him, his protective stance unshaken even as fear etched deep lines into his face. "I won't let them take her." But as he spoke, one of the taller flames bent, stretching like liquid fire until it hovered inches from his chest. The glow lit his features, carving the terror in sharp relief. The whisper curled around Clara's ear, close, intimate. "Clara!" Her lips trembled. She wanted to scream, to run, but something inside her leaned toward that voice. Warm, familiar, like her mother's lullabies long ago. "A trap wrapped in comfort. Don't answer it," Thomas shouted, his voice breaking. Clara clutched her head, shaking violently. The whispers tangled in her thoughts until she could barely tell which were hers. She tasted wax and smoke, the smell filling her lungs. And then, like a hand reaching from the fire, Her own name slipped from her lips before she could stop it. Clara. The chapel went still. Every flame bowed in unison, as though acknowledging its newest keeper. Jonah's face crumpled. "No," Thomas turned to her, horror in his eyes. "What have you done?" And in the silence that followed, a single new candle on the altar flared to life, its flame tall, unyielding, whispering her name. The air in the chapel grew heavier, pressing against Clara's chest like an invisible weight. Her candle burned at the far end of the altar, tall and unflinching. Every flicker of its light called her back toward it, a tether she could not break. Thomas's hands shook as he grabbed her shoulders, his voice raw. "Clara, fight it." "Don't listen!" But the whispers had grown softer, more intimate now, curling around her heart like threads of silk. They no longer shouted, they coaxed. "Rest, belong, stay." Jonah, still standing between them and the altar, looked more ghost than boy. His 19-year-old face was pale, his eyes glowing faintly from the candlelight. "It's too late. Once the flame has your name, it never forgets." Thomas's jaw clenched. "There has to be a way." He looked around wildly. The chapel was a tomb of endless candles. But then, his gaze caught the altar's stone base. Carved into it were words nearly erased with age. "As it was lit, so it may be snuffed." His heart kicked. "The candles, if we put them out..." Jonah shook his head, his voice trembling. "You don't understand. They don't die. They never die. That's the curse." But Thomas was already moving. He ripped off his coat and lunged toward the altar, swiping at the nearest flame. The fire licked his sleeve but refused to dim. He tried again, harder, fanning wildly. The candle only burned brighter, mocking his efforts. The whispers rose in protest, their harmony breaking into chaos. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" Clara stumbled forward, her eyes locked on her own candle. It shone brighter than the rest, its light cutting through the smoky air. Her chest ached with a strange pull, as if part of her very soul had been fed into its wick. "Thomas," she whispered weakly. "I feel it. I can't leave. It already has me. No." He rushed back to her, desperation making his voice crack. "You're still here. You're still mine. I won't let them take you." The shadowy figures along the walls stirred again, peeling themselves free with jerking movements. They moved toward Thomas, arms outstretched, guarding the altar. Their touch brushed against him, cold as grave dirt. He swung his fist at one, but it passed through, useless. His rage burned, but so did his helplessness. Then Clara's gaze softened. A memory rose, her mother's voice praying at their bedside when they were children. A candle lit not for the dead but for the living. A prayer not of surrender but of hope. Her lips trembled. What if they burn because no one prayed for them to return? What if we... The thought steadied her. With sudden resolve, Clara dropped to her knees, pressing her palms together. Her voice shook, but grew stronger as she prayed aloud. Not to the chapel, not to the fire, but to the grace she had always believed lingered just beyond reach. Light that never dies. Release what you hold. These souls are not yours. The chapel shook. Candles flared wildly, their flames bending backward as though recoiling from her words. The shadows wailed, curling into themselves. Thomas fell beside her, clasping her hand. His deep voice joined hers, trembling with both fear and faith. "Bring her back. Bring them back." Jonah staggered, clutching his chest as though torn between two worlds. His candle flickered violently, dimming and flaring again. His eyes widened, tears running down his face. "It's working." One by one, faint flames began to gutter, not extinguished but freed, like lanterns carried away by the wind. The whispers thinned, no longer a suffocating chorus, but scattered voices fading into the distance. Clara's candle fought hardest, its tall flame bending in protest. The pull inside her deepened, like claws raking at her ribs. She screamed, her voice echoing through the chapel. "I will not stay!" And with a final burst of light, her candle shattered, scattering sparks that vanished before they touched the ground. Clara collapsed into Thomas's arms, sobbing, gasping as if she had surfaced from deep water. Her body trembled, but her eyes were her own again. Jonah smiled faintly through his tears, his face softening with relief. His own candle flickered out, and with it, his figure began to fade. Clara reached for him. "Jonah!" He shook his head gently, his voice a whisper not from the chapel but from his heart. "Thank you. You freed me." And then he was gone, like mist caught by the morning sun. The chapel grew quiet. The candles that remained burned lower, weaker, as though stripped of their endless hunger. Thomas held Clara tightly, his chest heaving. "It's over. It has to be." But as they staggered toward the door, the chapel seemed to breathe once more, its ancient wood creaking with life, and deep in the shadows, a single flame rekindled itself. Small, but unyielding, watching, waiting. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a whisper of grace today.